Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, I want to talk to you about imagination. Imagination is one of the most important ideas in religion and spirituality. You might find that little interesting statement given the fact that imagination is never really talked about in religious education or spiritual training or spiritual teaching or instruction or things like that, when in fact imagination is so critical that it is actually the bridge to spirituality. And it's only recently that we've identified this, started to study it, and started to go more deeper into it. I want to start by reading a poem from the Muslim philosopher, visionary, writer, teacher Ibn Arabi, who lived in the 1100s, 1200s era, and he was actually in Al-Andalus, what is formerly Muslim Spain. And he was a very powerful figure in the history of Muslim thought because he had a way of uniting many trends that were happening, many patterns that were happening in Muslim thought. He wrote poetry, he wrote philosophy, he wrote theology, he wrote all kinds of stories and commentaries and things like that. Lots and lots of books, lots and lots of writings. He traveled all around and had a unique impact on people around him during his time and afterwards. And so I want to read from one of his translations, the Tarjuman al-Ashwaq. It is a collection of his poetry translated by Reynold Nicholson. Nicholson is one of the most early solid scholars of Islam and translated many works of Rumi and Ibn Arabi and others. And you may have heard this before. O marvel, a garden amidst fires. My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for gazelles and a convent for Christian monks, and a temple for idols, and the pilgrim's Kaaba, and the tables of the Torah, and the book of the Quran. I follow the religion of love. Whatever way love's camels take, that is my religion and my faith. The key line in this poem is, my heart has become capable of every form. And he identifies the different religious forms that come to him, Christian, pagan, Muslim, Jewish, and he says, I've got room in my heart for all of it. My heart is so big and so wide that I've got space for all of those forms of worship because I see in their core, in their essence, worship itself, and that is a good thing. It's a very powerful statement. And one of the things I want to point out in our attempt to understand statements like this, poetry like this, spiritual vision like this is the idea of heart and mind and where emotion and intellectual thinking all fall in. So in traditional cultures, they did not have a separation between thinking and feeling. They did not have a separation between heart and mind. They talked about understanding as something that takes place in the heart. Asian cultures have this. Middle Eastern cultures have this. Other cultures have this. And the separation just wasn't there. Later on, in modern times, we separated these things so that the brain became the center of intelligence and intellectual thinking and intellectual capacity and things like that. The heart became something to do with emotion, feeling, love, affection, romance, anger, these kinds of things, and that separation has not helped us understand traditional ways of thinking at all. So when Ibn Arabi says, my heart has become capable of every form, he's not saying I'm emotionally capable of understanding different religions. He's saying the center of his awareness, the center of his consciousness, almost the totality of who he is as a person is the heart. And it has become a mirror for all kinds of religious practices and commitments and devotions. And so this idea that religion is a matter of just emotion, religion is a matter of heart, whereas science and business and other things are matters of the mind, is completely at odds with reality. Religion from the very beginning was an appeal to your intelligence. It was never an appeal to your emotions. When Moses or Jesus or Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all, are talking to people, they're not saying, be filled with emotion for God. Be filled with just emotion. Just emote for God. They're saying, understand, this is how the world was created. This is your role in it. This is what you are given. This is what you can do to be on the path to God. These are the things that you do that may take you off the path to God. That's somebody trying to teach you something. That's somebody trying to awaken your mind, right? Awaken your psychology, awaken your imagination. And what are they doing? They're telling you stories. Once upon a time, there was a garden, and there was somebody there named Adam and Hawa, and Adam and Eve, and they had everything in the garden, and there was a tree, and God said, don't go near the tree. And there was an enemy in the garden who was devising a way to make Adam and Eve fall. That's a story for your imagination. That's a story for your reflection. That's a story for your thinking. It's not a story to pump up your emotions, right? When Jesus says to the people on, you know the story, the Sermon of the Mount, when people start hearing about Jesus and his miracles of healing and all of this, they gather at the mount, and he speaks to them about lots and lots of different things. And he says, look at the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. And he's talking about how the heavenly creator is always providing for us, is always providing for the people, because they were worried about what tomorrow will bring. They were worried whether they would have enough food, whether anything they were planting would have fruit, whether whether they would have bread to eat, and things like that. And Jesus is saying, think about the lilies, think about the flowers, how they're arrayed. Even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. He's asking people to think. He's asking people to imagine. He's asking people to use their religious imagination, their spiritual imagination. And, when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brings the Quran is filled with stories, filled with images, right? The ayat that compares Allah. It says Allah, Nur samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. That's asking you to imagine something. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. That's asking you to imagine, right? The first lines of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God blew or brooded over the waters, and God said, let there be light. It's setting a scene. It's setting a once upon a time. Right? Once upon a time, you're in a place of imagination. And that's has to do with the intellectual, cognitive, thinking, reflecting, that kind of capacity. It doesn't have a whole. There's some emotional elements involved because their stories have emotion. But the words of Moses and Jesus and Muhammad aren't going right to your emotion. They're not saying religion is all emotion. But what ends up happening in kind of modern way of talking about religion is that mind is for science, intellectuality is for science and scholarship and business and finance and all of this. Religion has to do with emotions in the heart, right? The people today talk like this. Newspaper articles talk like this. This is for science and business. This is for religion. Emotion. Religious people are so emotional. They're not really thinking. They're so emotional. But if you look at the evidence, religion has been about your ideas and your thinking and your imagination from day one. From day one. You can bring emotion into it, right? Because emotion is a part of our lives. But the primary focus is on imagination. And when you hear intellectuality or intellect or something like that, what people generally think is this very kind of cerebral person, like a PhD in mathematics who doesn't know how to talk to people. That kind of, I'm very cerebral. I don't know, I'm very uncomfortable around people. Let me just sit in a room and, calculate my formulas. That's the kind of intellect or intellectual that they have in mind. Some PhD type who sits in his ivory tower and doesn't really know how to relate to people. But that's not the traditional definition of intellectuality. When the Quran talks about, aql, it's not this kind of disembodied brain floating around. We're talking about a whole human being. A human being that has a mind and a heart. In another way to say it is cognitive and affective abilities. And so imagination is the bridge to our spiritual life. When somebody says Allah is real and Allah is all around you, what they're asking you to do is imagine Allah all around you. He's not like a person, so he doesn't have a face and arms and legs and eyes and nose and all of this. He's not like air, but you can still imagine some abstract idea of some force, some presence all around you. Guess what? That's not emotional. That's imagination. That's imagination. When you hope for something, right now we're going through a difficult time. We hope for a better future. We hope for a solution. We hope for a cure. We hope for, a brighter tomorrow. That's imagination. Hope is built on imagination. Religion is sitting on imagination. Spirituality doesn't work without imagination. And so when I say imagination, I don't just mean, childhood fairy tales or daydreaming or something like that. Imagination serves a holy purpose. It is a holy thing. And one of the things that Ibn Arabi talks about in his philosophical writing is the alam al-mithal. The alam al-mithal, so there's alam al-jism, which is the world of the bodies. There's the alam al-arwah, the world of spirits. Arwah is the plural for ruh. And so between alam al-arwah and alam al-jism, there is alam al-mithal in the middle. Alam al-mithal is the world of imagination. Mithal means likeness. It is a middle world that is both like the one below it and like the one above it. And so in the image, you have a kind of permeable membrane that sits in the middle that receives inspirations from spirit and sends them down to the world of bodies. And you receive from the world of bodies people thinking and using their imagination to reach the world of spirit. And so that alam al-mithal plays the role of a kind of a train station, kind of an airport, a gateway, so that both worlds can talk to each other through this, through the mediation of the alam al-mithal. And you can see this all around, because when we are, trying to sit in prayer and say, one of the names of Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. What does Rahman mean? What does Rahim mean? What does Al-Haq mean? What does Al-Awwal, Al-Akhir, Al-Hayyul Qayyum, and all of these things? What do they mean? We may not understand what they mean to Allah, because we're not there yet. But we have some sense of what they might mean, some thin sense of what that is. And when we say these names, our imagination is working to project, kind of express, draw in some notion of these things. So if you say to yourself, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, that Rahman sitting at the alam al-mithal is actually you trying to reach above the through the alam al-mithal into the world of spirits, where ar-Rahman is much better understood, and to see if a little better understanding of ar-Rahman can come in through that image, through that alam al-mithal, and get to you, right? So you're going Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman. So you're going up and back, up and back, up and back. And Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, that image that you have becomes a kind of doorway for you to gain that better understanding of what is Ar-Rahman? What does it mean? What does it mean in my life? What does it mean in other people's lives? What does it mean in the life of the world? What does it mean in the life of the universe, angels, prophets, saints, other layers of reality that we haven't touched yet. And so you're drawing that, you're invoking the name in order to draw closer to the name. And it is your imagination that helps you do that. So the imagination plays a very powerful and holy role in your prayer life, in your religious life, in your spiritual life, in the life of hope, in the life of looking forward tomorrow, in the life of conceiving of other ways of being in the world, and other ways of constructing society, and other ways of how Allah wants us to live. It's all in your imagination, right? If Allah gives you a spiritual inspiration about something, and say Allah wants you to help the hungry or help the homeless or something, and that spiritual inspiration comes to you, and it's going to come through your spirit. It's gonna touch your alam al-mithal, your imagination. Your imagination is then going to receive that inspiration and then work to figure out what you can do to then embody that inspiration. So the spiritual impulse that comes can't immediately go to the bodily level. It has to go through the world of imagination, so that when that spiritual impulse comes, your imagination gets it, works with it, figures out what you can do to embody that in the world, and then you go embody that in the world. So your imagination is not just you trying to reach from your earthly life into spiritual life. It is also the way that spiritual life communicates to you on how to live your earthly life. And so there's that back and forth, up and down kind of train station, messaging, postal service going up and down all the time. And so we can have a different idea of imagination. And this is a vast topic. And Ibn Arabi was one of the first ones to talk about it in a way that placed it center in our understanding of spirituality and our spiritual life.